Nature has a warning system older than any app on your phone, and most people miss it completely until it's already too late. Right before major earthquakes, entire towns of animals go completely silent. Not calm, dead silent. Before tsunamis hit, the ocean pulls back so far that people actually walk out onto the exposed seabed to look, not realizing it's the final warning they'll ever get. Ants, bees, even fish sense danger long before any scientific instrument does. Here are 49 real, documented signs the wild gives us before disaster strikes. And by the end, you'll never look at a quiet forest or a still pond the same way again. Subscribe now, so next time nature warns you, you're not the one who missed it. 1. Folks love the myth that birds sing all day simply because nature feels cheerful and runs on some kind of woodland schedule like a built-in alarm clock. That idea is completely wrong, and honestly a little funny that anyone believed it. Birds do not sing purely out of joy, since singing actually marks territory and keeps the whole flock in contact. So when every bird in an area goes silent at once, it is not a coincidence or a random break. It means a predator just entered the area, and the entire block somehow got the memo instantly. Nature basically hit mute, and if you are enjoying that sudden peaceful silence, you might be standing right next to the reason for it. 2. People assume a deer staring at you frozen in place is just a majestic woodland creature admiring the view or posing for some imaginary calendar shoot. That myth deserves an instant roast. A frozen deer is not admiring anything, since it is actually running a full survival calculation, and the biggest variable in that equation might be standing directly behind you. Deer freeze because movement draws attention, so stillness becomes their emergency brake, while they assess a threat nearby. If a deer locks eyes with you and refuses to blink or bolt, it is not being cute at all. It is politely suggesting you turn around immediately because something behind you just turned the forest into a horror set. 3. A rattling snake sounds like fair warning before any real danger begins, and most people trust that pattern completely. That comforting idea needs an immediate roast right now. A rattling snake is still in its cautious warning phase and genuinely hoping you back away on your own. Real danger begins the instant that rattling stops and total silence takes over instead. Silence means the snake has decided warning time is finished and striking distance is now the only plan left. So the belief that noise equals danger, while quiet equals safety, is exactly backwards here. A sudden quiet rattlesnake near you has already switched into action mode. 4. A quiet mountain stream looks like some untouched postcard scene that never changes no matter what happens nearby. That charming idea gets busted the second the water turns cloudy, with zero rain in sight. Streams do not randomly turn murky for fun, since something upstream physically disturbed the ground or blocked natural flow. That could mean a landslide, a dam issue, or even a large animal stirring sediment somewhere out of view. Clear water turning cloudy overnight is basically nature sending a warning message downstream. Suspicious muddy water for no obvious reason usually means something upstream already had its own dramatic event first. 5. A joyful buzzing swarm bursting from a hive looks like bees simply having their best day out celebrating together. That comforting image is completely wrong and slightly ridiculous once the truth comes out. A tight, fast swarm exploding from a hive is not a party at all, since it is actually an eviction notice in motion. Bees swarm hard and fast, specifically when overcrowding or a failing queen forces an emergency relocation decision. This is not casual buzzing around flowers, since the whole colony is fleeing together toward a new home immediately. That dramatic cloud of bees is basically nature's most chaotic moving day happening all at once. 6. Cows lying down together in a field looks like pure laziness, with zero deeper meaning behind it whatsoever. That old belief gets roasted immediately once real science enters the conversation. Cows actually respond to dropping barometric pressure long before storms visibly appear anywhere near the horizon. Lying down together helps them conserve warmth and stability right as atmospheric pressure crashes ahead of severe weather. Farmers have trusted this pattern for generations since cows basically function as furry living barometers scattered across the pasture. An entire herd suddenly settling down together is not laziness at all. It is a four-legged weather forecast playing out live. 7. Squirrels burying food constantly looks like a random quirky habit carrying zero real meaning behind it whatsoever. That assumption gets busted hard once winter forecasting enters the picture. Squirrels burying food in an intense frenzy during the middle of summer are not confused at all. They are actually sensing early signals that a brutal, harsh winter is approaching sooner than expected. This behavior shift comes from environmental cues most humans typically cannot detect until much later in the season. Watching squirrels suddenly panic bury acorns in July is not random chaos happening for no reason. It is basically a furry meteorologist quietly warning everyone that winter plans should start now. 8. A strange green or yellow sky looks like an unusual sunset lighting trick, carrying no real danger attached to it. That comforting myth deserves an immediate roast before anyone relaxes further. A sickly green or yellow sky forms when sunlight passes through hail-filled storm clouds packed with dense moisture. This specific coloring is strongly associated with severe tornado-producing storms rather than any ordinary weather pattern. Meteorologists treat this sky color as a serious visual warning rather than a pretty coincidence worth photographing. A sky suddenly looking sickly and strange above your neighborhood is not artistic weather at all. It is basically nature waving a warning flag overhead. 9. Fish jumping out of water together looks like playful behavior happening purely for entertainment purposes and nothing else. That relaxed assumption gets busted the moment oxygen science enters the picture. Fish jumping in unison typically signals collapsing oxygen levels within the water rather than simple fun or curiosity. This usually happens during extreme heat algae blooms or pollution events that suffocate aquatic ecosystems rapidly. Watching an entire school leap simultaneously is essentially a mass emergency response rather than a synchronized performance. That dramatic jumping fish scene is not a nature documentary highlight moment at all. It is a full-blown survival reaction happening right in front of unaware onlookers. 10. Crickets stopping mid-chirp looks like random silence, carrying absolutely no meaning behind it whatsoever to most listeners. That casual assumption gets roasted the moment temperature and threat sensitivity enter the discussion. Crickets react instantly to sudden temperature shifts or approaching threats by cutting their chirping completely without warning. This abrupt silence often happens seconds before a major environmental shift or a predator moving through the area. Scientists have long used cricket chirp patterns to estimate temperature changes with surprising accuracy in real time. That eerie sudden quiet in a noisy field is not nothing happening around you. It is basically an instant biological alarm system going off. 11. Trees flipping their leaves upside down look like nothing more than a random breeze doing something slightly odd for a moment. That casual assumption gets busted once humidity science enters the picture. Leaves flip when rising moisture loosens their stems right before a storm system moves into the area. This reaction happens because leaf undersides are more sensitive to moisture changes than the smoother top surface. Farmers and hikers have used this exact pattern for generations to predict incoming weather shifts. An entire tree flashing pale undersides in the wind is not just a breeze. It is basically nature flipping its own storm sign. 12. Crows mobbing one spot in the sky look like nothing more than some noisy bird argument happening for no clear reason. That relaxed assumption gets busted once predator behavior enters the picture. These birds mob aggressively when they spot a threat significantly larger and more dangerous than themselves nearby. This behavior is a coordinated defense strategy meant to drive danger away from their nesting territory quickly. Scientists have documented crows organizing these events with surprising precision and teamwork across entire flocks. That chaotic aerial scrum overhead is not random bird drama happening above your head. It is an active neighborhood watch program in motion. 13. Mushrooms popping up overnight in a perfect ring look like some magical fairy circle appearing purely for decoration in the yard. That whimsical idea gets busted the moment soil science enters the conversation. Fungal rings form when underground networks spread outward evenly through unstable or disturbed soil conditions nearby. This growth pattern often signals shifting ground moisture or decomposition happening just beneath the visible surface. Old folklore turned these rings into fairy tales specifically because the real explanation seemed too strange to believe. That charming circle in the grass is not decoration or magic at all. It is a warning sign about unstable ground below. 14. Dogs howling at absolutely nothing visible look like pure boredom, or some random attention-seeking behavior happening for no reason. That casual dismissal gets busted once seismic sensitivity enters the picture. These animals can detect subtle ground vibrations and pressure shifts long before humans ever notice anything unusual nearby. This heightened sensitivity is often linked to minor seismic activity occurring well before an earthquake becomes noticeable to people. Researchers have tracked unusual animal behavior spikes in the hours leading up to major seismic events repeatedly. That eerie howling into empty space is not boredom or drama happening for attention. It is an early biological alarm system. 15. Tides pulling back unusually far look like a rare lucky chance to walk further out onto exposed sand than ever before. That exciting idea gets busted immediately once tsunami science enters the conversation. Extreme sudden withdrawal often signals a massive wave pulling water backward before slamming forward onto the coastline. This warning sign has preceded some of history's most devastating tsunami events across coastal regions worldwide. Coastal safety experts specifically train communities to treat this exact pattern as an urgent evacuation signal immediately. That thrilling exposed seafloor is not a lucky treasure hunting opportunity at all. It is basically the ocean loading its next move. 16. Butterflies vanishing from a field mid-season look like they simply migrated early or wandered off somewhere else entirely. That casual explanation gets busted once ecosystem collapse enters the picture. Their sudden disappearance often signals pesticide drift or a breakdown in the surrounding plant ecosystem they depend on. Butterflies are extremely sensitive indicator species, meaning their absence usually reflects deeper environmental damage happening nearby. Scientists frequently monitor these populations, specifically because their decline reveals problems long before larger animals show any symptoms. That empty, quiet field is not a simple seasonal coincidence happening on its own. It is an ecological warning sign playing out silently. 17. Owls calling loudly during broad daylight look like some confused bird simply making an odd mistake for no particular reason. That amusing assumption gets busted once internal clock science enters the conversation. These birds calling outside their normal nighttime schedule often signals confusion caused by artificial light pollution disrupting natural rhythms. This misfire in behavior reflects a broader pattern of urban light interference affecting nocturnal wildlife across many species simultaneously. Researchers have documented rising daytime activity specifically in areas experiencing heavy artificial lighting expansion nearby. That strange daytime hooting is not comedy or confusion happening for entertainment. It is a quiet signal that nature's clock got broken. 18. Metallic smells drifting through the air before a storm look like nothing more than an odd passing scent with zero real meaning. That relaxed assumption gets busted once lightning chemistry enters the conversation. That distinct odor comes from ozone generated by electrical activity building up rapidly within an approaching storm system. Detecting this scent often means significant lightning activity is forming close enough to strike within the immediate area soon. Meteorologists specifically train people to treat this exact smell as an early lightning proximity warning worth taking seriously. That strange sharp scent in the air is not a random atmospheric quirk happening for no reason. It is nature's early strike warning. 19. Spiders abandoning their carefully built webs look like laziness or simple carelessness, with absolutely no purpose behind it whatsoever. That casual dismissal gets busted once vibration sensitivity enters the picture. These creatures can detect subtle ground and structural vibrations long before humans ever notice anything unusual around them. This heightened sensitivity often triggers web abandonment, specifically when shifting ground conditions signal instability building up somewhere nearby. Researchers studying animal behavior before seismic events have repeatedly noted unusual insect and arachnid activity patterns emerging beforehand. That empty abandoned web swinging in the wind is not laziness happening for no reason. It is an early tremor detection system quietly at work. 20. Wasps building nests unusually high off the ground look like some random architectural choice made purely by accident, for no clear reason. That casual assumption gets busted once old folk weather wisdom enters the conversation. Generations of farmers have specifically linked unusually high nest placement to an increased likelihood of a flood-prone season ahead. While scientists debate the exact mechanism behind this pattern, the correlation has held remarkably consistent across many rural communities over decades. That surprisingly elevated nest, tucked high into a tree branch, is not random insect architecture happening by chance. It is basically an old-fashioned flood warning built right into nature. 21. A field of grasshoppers falling completely silent all at once looks like a lucky lull in the noise for a moment. That assumption gets busted once shadow detection enters the picture. This sudden stillness usually means a hunting shadow just passed overhead and every grasshopper froze in response. Insects rely heavily on detecting movement and shadow changes above them to survive constant aerial predator threats daily. Researchers studying insect behavior have documented this exact freeze response occurring within fractions of a second. That eerie quiet meadow is not a peaceful pause happening by chance. It is a mass survival reaction playing out silently. 22. Trees creaking loudly with absolutely no wind blowing look like some spooky sound effect happening for dramatic atmosphere alone. That assumption gets busted once drought stress enters the conversation. This creaking often comes from internal moisture loss, causing wood fibers to contract and shift under severe dry conditions. Forestry experts specifically treat this sound as an early indicator of dangerous fire risk building within a drought-stricken area. Entire forests have been flagged for evacuation planning based partly on this creaking pattern spreading across dry regions. That unsettling sound in still air is not a ghost story detail. It is a forest warning about fire danger. 23. A raccoon wandering around casually in broad daylight looks like just a curious critter exploring the neighborhood for fun. That assumption gets busted once rabies behavior enters the picture. Healthy raccoons are naturally nocturnal, meaning daytime activity strongly suggests neurological illness disrupting their normal instincts significantly. Wildlife officials specifically warn communities to treat daytime raccoon sightings as a potential rabies indicator rather than harmless curiosity. Animal control agencies have documented numerous cases where this exact behavior preceded confirmed rabies diagnoses across multiple regions nationwide. That seemingly friendly daytime raccoon strolling through a yard is not harmless. It is a serious warning sign worth avoiding immediately. 24. A sulfur smell drifting across a hiking trail looks like nothing more than a random unpleasant odor with zero explanation. That dismissal gets busted once geothermal science enters the conversation. This distinct rotten smell often signals volcanic or geothermal activity stirring beneath the surface in ways hikers rarely expect at all. Geologists specifically monitor sulfur emissions as an early indicator of shifting underground pressure within dormant or semi-active volcanic zones. Park rangers in geothermally active regions have repeatedly linked sudden sulfur odors to measurable increases in underground activity nearby. That gross smell on a pleasant trail is not bad luck. It is the earth announcing it is waking up. 25. A snake curling up tightly instead of slithering away looks like simple resting behavior with absolutely no danger attached whatsoever. That assumption gets busted once striking mechanics enter the conversation. This tight-coiled position is specifically how snakes load tension into their bodies before launching a fast defensive strike nearby. Herpetologists specifically identify this posture as a clear warning signal rather than relaxed lounging behavior most people assume instinctively. Wildlife experts consistently advise backing away slowly the moment this exact coiling pattern appears anywhere near a hiking trail. That seemingly calm curled snake is not resting peacefully. It is coiled tension waiting for the right moment to strike. 26. Moss growing unusually thick on one particular side of trees and rocks looks like just a random natural decoration with zero meaning. That assumption gets busted once microclimate science enters the conversation. This thick, uneven growth pattern typically signals a localized moisture shift caused by shifting sunlight exposure or nearby water changes nearby. Botanists specifically use moss density patterns to track subtle environmental changes occurring within a small localized ecosystem over time. Hikers and foresters have long used this exact clue to identify hidden water sources or shifting terrain conditions nearby. That thick green patch is not decorative charm happening by accident. It is a quiet map of changing moisture conditions. 27. Sudden static electricity crackling through hair outdoors looks like just an odd dry weather quirk with zero real danger attached. That assumption gets busted once lightning proximity science enters the conversation. This exact sensation often means an electrical charge is building rapidly in the atmosphere directly above an exposed area outdoors. Meteorologists specifically train hikers and campers to treat this feeling as an immediate signal that lightning could strike within seconds nearby. Survival experts have documented numerous cases where this static sensation preceded a nearby lightning strike by mere moments. That strange tingling hair sensation is not a funny coincidence. It is nature's final warning before a strike. 28. A woodpecker drilling non-stop into a metal surface right at dawn looks like some annoying random noise with zero real explanation behind it. That assumption gets busted once mating confusion enters the conversation. This repetitive drilling often reflects seasonal mating signals misfiring against metal surfaces that amplify sound louder than natural wood ever could manage. Ornithologists specifically note this behavior increasing whenever seasonal shifts happen earlier than expected across a given region. Homeowners in multiple states have reported this exact noisy pattern spiking suddenly during unusually warm early spring weather stretches. That relentless metallic drumming at sunrise is not random annoyance, it is a seasonal signal arriving earlier than expected. 29. An entire hillside of pine trees turning red all at once looks like some unusual seasonal color change happening purely for scenic beauty. That assumption gets busted once beetle infestation science enters the conversation. This rapid red discoloration typically signals a bark beetle infestation actively killing large sections of forest from the inside out completely. Forestry officials specifically use this exact color pattern as an early visual indicator of infestation spread, requiring urgent management response quickly. Entire regions have lost massive forest sections after ignoring this same red warning pattern spreading across hillsides for years. That colorful hillside is not a beautiful accident. It is a forest actively dying in real time. 30. Fireflies disappearing suddenly in the middle of summer look like they simply moved somewhere else, or finish their natural seasonal cycle early. That explanation gets busted once pollution science enters the conversation. This sudden disappearance often signals pollution or drought conditions wiping out the specific breeding grounds fireflies depend on completely and permanently. Entomologists specifically track firefly population crashes as an early indicator of broader environmental damage within a local ecosystem nearby. Multiple regions have reported steep firefly declines directly correlated with increased light pollution and habitat loss over recent years. That empty dark yard once full of glowing lights is not coincidence. It is an ecosystem losing one of its brightest signals. 31. A bear rising onto its hind legs looks like an aggressive move signaling an imminent attack about to happen any second. That assumption gets busted once actual bear behavior enters the conversation. Standing upright is simply how bears gain a better vantage point to see, smell, and evaluate a situation more clearly. This posture is closer to cautious assessment than aggression since actual charges happen on all four legs instead. Wildlife biologists specifically note that attacking bears rarely stand tall, since balance and speed both matter more during real charges. That towering bear on two legs has already noticed you and is quietly deciding what happens next. 32. Bubbles rising steadily from the ground near a lakeshore look like harmless little water features bubbling up for no particular reason. That assumption gets busted once underground gas science enters the conversation. These bubbles typically signal methane release escaping through unstable ground layers destabilized by shifting sediment or decomposing organic material below. Geologists specifically flag persistent ground bubbling as an indicator of unstable earth that could shift or collapse without much additional warning. Several lakeside communities have reported small sinkholes forming shortly after similar bubbling patterns went unnoticed for weeks. That gentle fizzing patch of ground turns out to be unstable earth quietly venting a warning underneath everyone's feet. 33. Wind suddenly reversing direction along a mountain trail looks like a random gust simply shifting for no clear reason whatsoever. That assumption gets busted once storm formation science enters the conversation. This kind of abrupt reversal typically means a new storm cell has just formed directly behind a nearby ridge and is pulling air inward fast. Meteorologists specifically train mountain guides to treat sudden wind shifts as an urgent signal to descend before conditions deteriorate rapidly. Hikers across multiple states have reported severe storms arriving within minutes of noticing this exact wind reversal pattern. That strange gust reversing course means a storm has already formed just out of sight. 34. A herd of wild horses bolting suddenly in one direction with no visible trigger looks like pure panic erupting for absolutely no reason at all. That assumption gets busted once infrasound science enters the conversation. Horses can detect extremely low-frequency sound waves traveling ahead of a distant earthquake long before any tremor becomes noticeable to humans nearby. Researchers studying animal behavior before seismic events have repeatedly documented similar unexplained bolting patterns occurring across herds beforehand. Ranchers in earthquake-prone regions have specifically learned to treat this exact behavior as an early natural warning system worth trusting. That sudden stampede across open land turns out to be an early tremor playing out before anyone else notices. 35. An entire beach suddenly covered in shells and starfish washing ashore all at once looks like a rare, beautiful coastal spectacle worth photographing immediately. That assumption gets busted once ocean oxygen science enters the conversation. This mass stranding typically signals an offshore oxygen dead zone, forcing marine life toward shallower water in a desperate search for breathable conditions. Marine biologists specifically treat sudden mass strandings as an urgent indicator of collapsing water quality happening somewhere beyond visible range offshore. Coastal communities have repeatedly linked similar stranding events to algae blooms and pollution spreading through nearby waters. That stunning shell-covered beach actually marks marine life fleeing a hidden crisis nobody can see from shore. 36. A porcupine climbing down from a tree and freezing out in the open looks like confused wandering behavior happening for absolutely no clear reason whatsoever. That assumption gets busted once chemical exposure science enters the conversation. This disoriented freezing often signals exposure to a chemical spill or contamination drifting upwind from some unseen source nearby. Wildlife rescue groups specifically treat unusual daytime porcupine activity as an early indicator of environmental contamination affecting an entire local area. Several rural communities have discovered contamination sources only after noticing multiple disoriented animals behaving strangely within the same general region. That confused porcupine frozen in the open ends up announcing contamination long before any human notices the smell. 37. A sinkhole slowly cracking open underground. Looks like ordinary ground settling happening naturally over time, without any real concern attached. That assumption gets busted once active collapse science enters the conversation. Gradual cracking actually signals continuous active collapse rather than simple settling, since real settling typically stabilizes quickly instead of progressing steadily. Geological engineers specifically distinguish between stable settling and dangerous active collapse based on whether cracks continue widening over consecutive days. Multiple neighborhoods have experienced catastrophic sinkhole collapses after mistaking active cracking for harmless ground settling for weeks. That slowly widening crack in the yard turns out to be active collapse steadily working its way toward daylight. 38. Elk bugling loudly outside their normal mating season looks like some random vocal outburst happening for absolutely no clear reason whatsoever. That assumption gets busted once territorial stress science enters the conversation. Off-season bugling frequently signals unusual territorial stress caused by an unseen threat disrupting normal herd behavior within their established range. Wildlife biologists specifically flag out-of-season bugling as an indicator worth investigating, since it often points toward predator pressure or habitat disruption nearby. Park rangers in several states have documented this exact behavior spiking shortly before confirmed predator sightings within the same territory. That unexpected bugling echoing through the woods signals stress from a threat nobody has actually spotted yet. 39. A wall of dust rising along a dry, distant horizon looks like an ordinary dust cloud kicked up by wind passing through for a moment. That assumption gets busted once Haboob science enters the conversation. This rising wall actually forms ahead of a powerful downburst, pushing dust forward faster than most people can outrun on foot, or even by vehicle sometimes. Meteorologists specifically warn desert communities that these walls can travel well over 30 miles per hour once fully formed and moving. Multiple regions have reported drivers caught completely off guard by how quickly these walls close distance across open terrain. That distant dust wall turns out to be a fast-moving storm already closing the gap. 40. Complete animal silence settling over an area right before an earthquake looks like an unusually peaceful moment, happening purely by coincidence, for no reason. That assumption gets busted once seismic sensitivity science enters the conversation. Animals across many species can detect subtle vibrations and pressure changes traveling ahead of a quake long before humans notice anything unusual happening nearby. This exact silence pattern remains one of the most consistently documented natural warning signs recorded across multiple major earthquake events throughout history worldwide. Researchers continue studying this phenomenon specifically because the pattern repeats so reliably across completely different species and regions. That eerie total silence turns out to be nature's most trusted warning sign quietly at work. 41. Ants marching away from their hill in a perfectly straight line look like some odd construction project happening for no clear reason. That assumption gets busted once flood forecasting enters the conversation. This marching pattern often signals colonies relocating ahead of rising groundwater or an approaching flood threatening their tunnels. Entomologists note, ants detect subtle shifts in soil moisture and air pressure long before visible flooding appears. Farmers in flood-prone regions have relied on this behavior for generations to anticipate rising water early. That straight line of ants marching away turns out to be a flood forecast written into the dirt. 42. A single ladybug swarm blanketing a wall overnight looks like a strange insect invasion happening for no clear reason. That assumption gets busted once temperature crash science enters the conversation. Ladybugs cluster tightly whenever they sense a sharp temperature drop threatening to expose them to dangerous cold within hours. Entomologists identify this clustering as a survival response triggered by falling pressure and shifting seasonal patterns nearby. Homeowners across several states have reported these swarms appearing directly before unexpected cold snaps hit hard. That sudden wall of ladybugs turns out to be nature's own frost warning clinging to the siding. 43. Cicadas cutting off mid-chorus all at once look like a random pause within their usual noisy summer routine. That assumption gets busted once barometric pressure science enters the conversation. This abrupt silence typically signals a rapid pressure drop rather than a predator interrupting their constant droning noise. Entomologists distinguish this pressure-triggered silence from predator silence by how suddenly the whole chorus stops together. Residents across several regions have reported this silence preceding fast-moving storms arriving within the hour. That dead quiet where cicadas once roared turns out to announce a storm nobody saw coming yet. 44. Jellyfish washing ashore by the hundreds look like an unusual ocean event happening purely by coincidence. That assumption gets busted once storm surge science enters the conversation. This mass stranding typically signals a significant surge building offshore and pushing entire colonies toward the coastline ahead of arrival. Marine biologists treat sudden jellyfish strandings as an early coastal warning worth monitoring alongside official storm data. Coastal towns have repeatedly reported strandings occurring hours before confirmed surges made landfall nearby. That strange beach covered in stranded jellyfish turns out to be the ocean quietly previewing what is coming. 45. A coyote trotting calmly through a neighborhood at noon looks like bold, reckless behavior happening for no clear reason. That assumption gets busted once drought displacement science enters the conversation. This calm daytime appearance often signals a distant water source drying up and forcing the animal into unfamiliar territory searching for survival. Wildlife officials link rising urban coyote sightings to prolonged drought-pushing displaced animals from their remote ranges. Multiple cities have reported spikes in daytime activity, directly correlating with regional drought severity. That relaxed coyote wandering through backyards turns out to be desperation, disguised as boldness. 46. Cave bats flying out disoriented during broad daylight look like a strange, confused mistake happening for no clear reason. That assumption gets busted once cave disturbance science enters the conversation. This daytime emergence often signals a serious disturbance deep inside the cave, including possible toxic gas disrupting their normal roosting environment. Wildlife biologists treat disoriented daytime emergences as urgent since healthy colonies rarely leave shelter during daylight voluntarily. Cave researchers in several states have found dangerous gas pockets shortly after observing this exact pattern. That chaotic daylight bat exodus turns out to signal trouble brewing deep inside the cave. 47. A goat herd, bunching tightly into one corner of a field, looks like ordinary herd behavior happening for no clear reason. That assumption gets busted once predator scent science enters the conversation. This tight clustering typically signals goats detecting an unfamiliar predator scent drifting across the wind from somewhere just beyond view. Farmers treat this bunching as an early warning worth investigating before losing livestock to an approaching predator overnight. Ranchers across several regions have confirmed predator activity nearby shortly after observing this same clustering pattern. That sudden crowded corner of nervous goats turns out to be an alarm sounded through scent alone. 48. A rabbit thumping the ground rapidly before bolting in a zigzag pattern looks like random panic happening for no clear reason. That assumption gets busted once predator evasion science enters the conversation. This thumping serves as a direct warning to nearby rabbits, while the zigzag bolt confuses a ground predator closing in fast from behind. Wildlife behaviorists identify this combined pattern as one of the most effective evasion strategies documented among small prey species. Field researchers have confirmed nearby predator presence immediately following this exact sequence across multiple habitats. That frantic, thumping rabbit darting wildly turns out to be broadcasting a predator closing in. 49. An entire beehive suddenly falling dead silent instead of humming looks like a peaceful, quiet moment happening naturally within a busy colony. That assumption gets busted once colony collapse science enters the conversation. This silence typically signals disease or systemic collapse spreading through the colony rather than an external attack or predator disturbance nearby. Beekeepers treat sudden total hive silence as an urgent red flag requiring immediate inspection before the colony collapses completely. Apiaries across several states have reported losing entire hives shortly after first noticing this silence take over. That eerie silent hive turns out to be a colony quietly collapsing from within. So there you have it. 49 signs. Nature basically screams at you before things go sideways, and somehow humans still walk toward the weird smell and the silent birds every single time. Nature really said read the room, and we said nah, we're good. If any of these creeped you out or made you laugh nervously, smash that like button, subscribe to BrainFumble, hit the notification bell so you never miss the next one, and share this with the one friend who always ignores warning signs. Now tell me in the comments, which one of these 49 signs would actually make you turn around and run?